Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 151. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have with us the internationally acclaimed host of Two Geeks Talking, Kurt Sasso.
Oh, you give me too much credit here, Barney. How you doing?
Good. How you doing? So it's funny. It's like, it's a big world out there, but it's so small when it comes to community-based interests. And I was fortunate enough to discover you when you were interviewing our mutual connection, Stephanie.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and
she's amazing. Love her.
She is amazing, and she is amazing. Oh, you know what? I think she's watching. She just made a laugh face.
Hi, Stephanie.
Yeah, she goes. Stephanie Nina Pizzarillos. So I made sure I memorized her name before she came on. So now I can't never forget Pizzarillos. I always have to say Pizzarillos now. So talk to us a bit about. I was really excited. So when then I saw that and I was watching your interviews, I was enthralled by just diving into the rabbit hole that is Kurt Sasso and Two Geeks Talking, and seeing all the guests that you've had on, and just watching the ability of how engaged you are with your guests, and how you present yourself with genuine curiosity, and you present yourself with the ability to keep conversation moving. And I know that you and I, when we there's other podcasts out there that you can, and it's interesting to see that some of this stuff. I have to ask you, first off, I went backwards years of going back. I'm like, he's like the quality, like it's like I don't know if I've gone back far enough, but you seem to always have this consistent level of quality on your interviews, and to be able to keep that engagement. So question number one is, where did this gift come from? And do you have it in a bottle someplace? Like, is it like a genie and then I guess the other question too is, how did you get started? Because you, in your previous interview, you talked about, listen, I was always kind of an introvert and kind of jumped into it. And you were doing this way back in the dawn of the podcasting back in 2008. So I threw a few questions at you, but I'll let you kind of filter through those two questions.
Well, I can start with the second one first.
Okay.
And I've told the story before, but it's how does one get started in podcasting when one has no resources on podcasting is kind of the basis of Two Geeks Talking, or way back when it was TGT Webcomics. So the story is, back in 2008, Phil from who is an amazing, talented website designer and coder. I was helping him with webcomics.com, which originally he owned the site before he sold it to Brad Geiger. Anyhow, so the basis of webcomics.com back then was it was a database for all these amazing webcomics that were on the internet at that time. And back in 2008, it was the heyday of webcomics. It was really the crest of so many talented, creative people that had already gotten started by a Penny Arcade and a PvP online, and all of those amazing, talented people as well. And they're still talented to this day. And so what I wanted to do was, we have this website, Phil, we should really interview webcomic creators, get them on a podcast, and let's interview them, because we have so many people on this website. Let's take advantage of that. And he was like, sure, go ahead. So exactly. I chuckled at that too, because it was quite literally, how do I get into podcasting? I was an introvert. I still am, but I've gotten from an introvert to an extrovert is how I've defined myself these days. But the first 60 episodes of the show back in 2008, I hadn't found my voice yet. And so for me, it was a level of understanding myself as an interviewer or co-host at that time. And then, how do you keep a conversation going? Because for us, it was literally, okay, we have these guests on the show. we have to ask them questions. We have to be entertaining. We have to, bring what they're trying to showcase. Hey, we're going to talk about your comic. Come on the show. Let's talk.
Right.
But how do you do that back in 2008? How do you do that with, to be perfectly honest, really crappy sound, like under 48 hertz sound quality for podcast interviews using TalkShoe of all things? So roundabout way of basically saying is, early technology, introverted people trying to interview introverted people. It's kind of how it boils down, I guess.
So, as that happened, as you're having those interviews, as you mentioned, like TalkShoe, is that what you used?
Yeah.
What were the platforms else that was out there that you were able to choose from?
Oh, you're really diving back into my memory now. TalkShoe was the only one that you could safely record audio. Okay. Skype was the other one that you could record audio through TalkShoe. So you could have a Skype call, record it through TalkShoe, have a live show right then and there. So there was no editing, nothing like that. It was pure chaos, literally, between disconnected calls and horrible audio and crackly connections and all the other stuff. And you had to post it somewhere. So TalkShoe was not only a recording site, it was also a podcast host. And so it worked out really well for a good number of years. And then they deleted my entire archive. So I didn't know about that until 2015. Luckily, I have the hard copy still, so that I haven't lost my archive. So I still have that. But that was really the only thing you could do. You had to use Skype. You had to use TalkShoe. Those were the only real pieces of software that you could record on. And of course, you had to have a website as well too. From a social media platform perspective, Twitter was not even in the picture, quite literally. Facebook was kind of there, and it was a good place to kind of start. But you still had MySpace, you still had Zanga and a bunch of other websites as well too that you could post to. It was just, what did you want to choose?
Great. And so with that, but also too is like being, the term podcast comes from iPod. So and and there really wasn't other. I mean, Spotify wasn't really.
No, Spotify wasn't even there. So iTunes, Apple iTunes was the only software you could link your podcast to.
Okay.
And it worked out well, except podcast doesn't host anything. They just link to your RSS feed. So whatever quality you had, whatever it was linking to is what would get played.
Right.
So it was kind of it was a shame that iTunes didn't take advantage of the fact that they could have been the podcasting platform back then compared to what they are currently. So,
because right now, so where did you see, like when you were podcasting in 2008, 2009, 2010? What were some of the things that you're saying to yourself, man, I just wish the technology would do X or Y? And what were some of those things that you were saying, if only the capacity to do this or this would it be there, that, and have any of those come to fruition? Or is there anything that you would still wish 14 years ago were still in place that wish that would exist now?
I wish I would have done videos sooner.
Okay.
I really wish I would have done that sooner. I wish I could have taken advantage of YouTube sooner as well too. And I did. To be honest, the channel itself, and actually the old site is still, the old channel is on YouTube still. I still have to migrate over to this new one. But I took advantage of that as soon as I started the show. As soon as I literally got the podcast up and running, I immediately found a YouTube channel, created a website, did all my social media to the best of my ability at that time. And I was able to put together, what kind of the platform of what we had here. But I really wish I would have done video interviews instead of audio interviews. The only downfall with that is I don't think the video quality would have been as good as it is today. Like if this technology today was that back then, you'd have a whole new level of people.
Right. And so what are so talk to us a bit about because you're deliberate in the fact that you have the Two Geeks Talking. So it's you're focusing on video games. You originally was focusing on indie comics. That was your first thing. What was it, strategic or organic to expand out away from indie comics and web comics and focus on other genres of entertainment?
Well, I haven't stopped doing indie creators.
Right.
Let's put that out there right here now. I still love indie creators. I still have them on the show. I still will interview them no matter what. And I think that more than ever they need a voice.
Right.
And I hope the show can provide that. I truly do. I think that the reason why I expanded to entertainment as a whole, because I've only done I think maybe 5 or 6 episodes of video games, to be perfectly honest. And they've been great interviews, don't get me wrong. But I think the reason why I expanded to entertainment back in 2010 was 2 reasons. One, I was getting burnt out with webcomics, only because I'd interviewed pretty much everyone except for the very big names. I'm not saying that to brag or anything. I did over 200 plus interviews of every webcomic creator, and I think I have maybe 9 left on my list to interview. I believe the only people I haven't interviewed are Penny Arcade and Mega Tokyo and Dominic. No, I got Dominic Deegan, but the big names like that. But I got all of 3/4 of the Half Pixel crew. I got pretty much everyone else, for that matter, more than once. On that occasion, I even got Phil Folio twice on the show, and he was episode 10 of the actual original show.
And I remember you saying in a previous episode that was your first, as you said, like your first big name of interview.
Yeah, I mean, quite literally, Girl Genius is still popular to this day, and he and Kaja are still extremely consistent in what they do, and they do beautiful work, truly. But for a new show to simply, at that time, email them and say, "Hey, would you like to come on TGT Webcomics?" For them to say yes, or at least for Phil to say yes, it was a dream come true. It was truly exciting.
And what are some of the things that you would look? So, as you say, that you interview a lot of indie creators, and sometimes they'll say, I've been thinking about going back to my first few issues and kind of redoing them because I don't really like the artwork. It's different than it was before. Is there anything when you listen to your archives of things that you learned that you don't do now, like, because you've interviewed 1,000 interviews? So what are some of that's amazing. You're like in 4 digits. So what were some of the things that you would that you wished you knew?
Yeah.
Years ago?
I think for me, I wish I would have had a stable introduction, because back then we used to use our handles, our old handles from back in the day. So I think if we would have started this, I think a proper introduction with similar to what I have now on the show, if we had something similar to that, and maybe it evolved over the years, that would be a great start. And an outro as well, something to, point them towards the website or point them towards our social media and get more interaction that way. And I think that's what we did good for organic pull, which was really huge in a lot of our interviews, where people would listen to other interviews and they'd be like, yeah, I want to come on the show. And it wasn't more of us fishing to get guests to come on the show. And so I think that if we kind of had a format, a proper format, not the cookie cutter that you see in today's industry, where people with shorter attention spans as invested into these types of things that are necessary. I think that if we were consistent that way, it would have helped. I think graphically we were pretty consistent. I think we could have done better with our title images and everything like that. It was when you're first learning Photoshop, you cringe at your mistakes and all that other stuff. Same with editing as well too. It quite literally is. I learned a lot because I didn't edit for the first 10 years of the show. So we had shows where we were doing 2+ hour interviews at the beginning. Wow. Our longest show, or my longest interview, was 4+ hours with Trevor Mueller. Only half of that got posted.
Oh, geez, Louise! Wow.
It was a very long work day after that.
and so, what do you use now for your editing software?
So for me, I still use Premiere. I still use Adobe Premiere and everything along that line. So Adobe Premiere, Photoshop for my I have templates for pretty much everything. The only thing I really go in depth on is Premiere, where I start to really fine tune the ums and the ahs and all that other stuff. And maybe someone, when they're talking, they don't have, maybe they lose their train of thought. Well, I don't want to showcase that. I want to showcase, their full train of thought, so that it's a nice, seamless, audio experience at least.
Right. So if because we have listeners, we have like authors and artists and stuff that listen to the show, and and a good addendum to their medium would be maybe hosting a podcast or something like that. If they said, hey, listen, Kurt, I got $100. I got $100. What is, and I want to do a podcast. What should I do with that $100 first? Where should I invest that money into?
A common thing, and because I went back to school for visual arts and film, and a common saying is, you can have the best film ever made, and if it has crappy audio, it doesn't matter how good the picture is. So invest in your audio quality. Like, take small. Start with a microphone. Start with that process. Have good software, recording software, whatever you use. I use XSplit. It works for me because I do video. There are other, Streamlabs, I'm sure, does beautiful work as well too, and I'm sure there's other software that I'm not familiar with that people use that does a wonderful job. But if you can get a decent microphone, whatever your money will give you, then get it. And there are resources now with podcasting that, if I had that information way back when, it would make my life a whole lot easier. Truly, I honestly, I wish I had that information. Everything that I've done has been trial and error, and it's been painful,
right?
Costly sometimes too, but yeah.
And so, what would be your recommendation then, as somebody who's been in the field for 14 years doing this, for those artists and authors that are listening right now, and indie comic creators? What would be your advice to them to how to market their work?
If you're not using social media to its full extent, to the point of basically getting a cease and desist letter from people on the internet, then that's the only way I can suggest you promote yourself. Because if you're consistently putting out your own artwork and your own comics, and you have your own schedule and you're showcasing what you're doing, it's the same thing for a podcast. It's the same thing for any type of creative endeavor you do. If you are excited about what you're doing for as long as you do it, and other people are excited about it, then that's the best you can hope for. And if I didn't have Twitter, if I didn't have any type of social media like that, and I didn't keep badgering people with auto posts of, hey, here's the next interview, which I have lost followers from, basically. But I have to showcase the interviews, or else I'm going to get lost in the masses. And as a creative person, you have to do the same thing. We're all fighting for a fraction of a second of your time.
Right.
I mean, the Twitter feeds that scroll by are massive, and even if you use like a TweetDeck or something like that, that's, categorized what you need to do. Like I have one for podcasts, I have one for um, creative entertainment people, artists, comic creators, whatever. I my feed's just constantly scrolling by, and occasionally I'll see my post. But yeah, promote yourself. Use social media.
So what did you mention? A tweet deck. Can you explain what that is?
A TweetDeck's just a software that allows you to consolidate uh, Twitter, basically your Twitter account.
Okay.
So it's your main Twitter account, just in a categorized column format.
So that would be something if somebody's looking to. It's when you brought that up, and in the way you brought that up is like how important is putting stuff out in social media? How important is that it's finding your community?
Well, you either create your own community or you find a community that you're part of.
Okay.
And so the webcomics community is really just the comics community with internet comics. Um, there's a variety of others
Right.
subcategories for it. It depends on how you want to promote yourself. You're going to find like people that you like on a personal level and on a creative level as well too. And so once you start interacting with them and you become their friends and genuine friendship, not just, hey, promote my stuff type deal. If you truly want to support other artists who you want them to support you, then be genuine in what you like and how you comment with them and how you share their information. These little free things that you can do in a fraction of a second is really helpful to not only their psyche, to be perfectly honest, but also to showcase it to people that maybe they aren't linked to, that maybe
Right.
you are.
And so, where do you see, as you mentioned earlier, you've been back in 2008. I mean, it was the web comics world was a few hundred, a couple hundred. There wasn't a lot of web comics, but now there's
Mm, I
well,
I think you're a little off on that, because in 2008 I had a bookmarks list of over 4,000
oh,
webcomics.
was it? Okay, all right. Because I was just kind of referring that you said that you interviewed them all, so I didn't know if it was like
Well, let me rephrase that. I interviewed all the popular ones.
no. Do you see that? Do you see the expansiveness of the accessibility of there's so many ways that you can make a web comic? Um, do you see this as an issue of like that high water raises all boats, or do you see people just kind of getting lost that you getting lost in the noise?
I think because there's so many new digital platforms out there like Tapas and Webtoons and a variety of others as well too. Heck, I read a ton of digital comics these days, a lot more than I probably have time for. That's what my lunch breaks are for. But I think that it really comes down to there are so many new avenues to push yourself creatively,
Mm,
that as long as you follow the guidelines on submissions and all that stuff, you have your a new batch of, actually I think it's the second renaissance of digital comics for that
mm,
matter, not just web comics, because the day of the website is slowly going away, and it's still there, but as maybe a base for your content. But there's so many other pieces of content and platforms that you can connect with and to, that allows you to really showcase what you can do.
mm. And where do you see web comics in 5 years?
Maybe virtual. At some point in time, we're going to have to go virtual.
Mm,
Uh, they already have Beat Saber and stuff like that. They already have virtual reality to some extent for games and such. I don't see why this doesn't go to that type of level. I mean, will we eventually get the whole, chips in the head type situation where we can connect directly to the internet? Maybe. Who knows? Could be a sci-fi pipe dream, but it would be interesting to see that level.
and do you see there with because I haven't met anyone yet who was unsurprised with the return of record players. Do you think that there's always going to be a place for analog comics like the
Oh yeah,
paperbacks?
yeah. I That will never die. As much as I'm sure the newspaper industry, wishes they could take back a few things they said back in the early 2000s when they were trying to fight web comics and all that stuff. Now all of the old comics of the yesteryear are online.
Great.
Irony.
So what are you, and you may, as you mentioned earlier, is like you're the work you do, and you've had over, I think you've had like over, looking at your website, I think you had like have over 60 guest hosts at one point or another, right? Is that number around?
Yeah, I've had a few amazing guest hosts. That's for sure.
Do you, and some of this, like, primarily as the executive producer, where you have to wear all the hats, what's part of that you kind of like, you're surprised yourself that you enjoy doing? Is it like editing or graphic designing or any of that stuff?
First and foremost, I think that it's talking with the people. Okay. The editing, it's a pain in the ass. It's a pain. So the editing is a pain. The graphic is just a template. So yeah, it takes a little time. But if I'm not in the right headspace when it comes to editing, I put it aside and I come back to it. But it's talking with the guests, talking with the people, the people that are taking their time to come on the show after all these 14 years, which I still can't wrap my mind around. That still boggles my mind. I still keep thinking it's 13 years for some reason, but is what it is. August 8th, 2008 is when we started. We were on before the WTF Mark Maron show. We were on before Joe Rogan. We were on before a bunch of these other shows. But, we're not popular because we weren't comedians. So,
But 14, I mean, that means Two Geeks Talking is now considered a sophomore in high school, right?
I don't know what avenue you're going with that thought process. We're in high school. Okay, I'll give you that. Yeah.
14 years old, though. That's impressive.
Where's the car, Dad? Come on.
But so my question is, like, where do you see Two Geeks Talking? What's your future vision of the evolution in the direction of Two Geeks Talking?
Well, my current goal is two things. I want to get the YouTube channel more popular. I need 1,000 followers and I need 4,000 hours as of this interview to hit YouTube's algorithm to get monetized again. Back in 2016, we were disabled from monetization because that's how YouTube was. So we had over 500,000 views on YouTube. We made maybe $100 before they disabled us. Speaking of algorithms, how crappy that is.
Right.
And so my goal for 2022, have to add the 2 in there, is I need 1,000 followers. And as of this recording, it's 539. December last year, we finally hit 500. Earlier in the year, last year, we were at 425. Wow. So we've had steady improvement, steady progress from great people, the fans and creative people alike on Twitter, and, taking the time just to hit the follow button on the show, subscribe to the channel, and interact and like the interviews that I'm posting. And for a guy that's been doing it for 14 years solo with no help after episode 61, I really think that, these types of little kudos, I guess you could call it, a heart on a post, a retweet, a like on a video, a comment on a video, sharing the interview with other people. I really think it just truly helps, a creative person, because we put so much time, or I put so much time into the content and the editing, finding the guests, really showcasing their talents, because all I do is ask questions. I want to give them a space that they can promote themselves. And I hope I provided that over the years with the people. And I really hope that they keep coming back for interviews, whether it's, a year from now, 2 years from now, whatever.
So what is your criteria then as you pick it? So what's the theme? Have you had, if you had any inquiries were like not really the right platform for you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I've had a few, and it was easier when I was going through email where I could filter. And I've had people message me directly saying, "Hey, I want to promote this, this, and this," and I'd be like, "It doesn't fit my show, unfortunately." I can't give any examples at the moment because I really can't remember of what happened. But long story short is the show is about entertainment interviews. If you're in comics, TV, film, music, video games, of a geeky nature type situation, I mean, TV, movies, and video games, I mean, don't have to be geeky, but I like the musicians to be. If they happen to be a musician and a geek, I think that's awesome. A great combination. I've had comic creators that have been musicians, so I mean that's pretty cool too. So
right. And so, where do you see? Is there no? So, have you had any? Because I think I've seen on there you've had some kind of spin-off shows at one point or another as well.
Yeah, I've had a few spin-off shows. They've not really gained any traction. I think I had TGT video games and a couple of others, but I think that was kind of the main one, where a friend of mine and I just, how friends get together and they talk about video games they played and all that stuff and what they thought about it and what was good, what was bad. That's kind of what we tried, but we never had a consistent schedule.
Right. And so what would be, and so how important is, and we talked earlier about, your color 99000. How important is it to have consistency with your branding as it helps for social media?
Huge. I mean, if you don't have a consistent logo, brand, color scheme, then when they look at the social media, they won't be able to really recognize who and what you are. So, funny story about that, and this is actually a pretty cool segue. The Two Geeks Talking logo you see at the top here is designed by Dawn Griffin, who is an amazing, talented illustrator. She's been on the show many times before. She created Zorfberg and Fred, and she's just too talented. Thanks, Dawn. Hashtag on that. So there's a story behind that. But that logo I have, and that I've used since pretty much the beginning, actually, of the, I think she created in 2009, maybe. And that logo I've used it in everything I've done. And people recognize the logo. They may not know the name, myself, Kurt Sasso, but they recognize the logo. They've seen it somewhere. They've seen it online. They've seen it, through social media, or they've seen it, whatever.
Right.
An iconic logo, and iconic color scheme. Like I always loved the red. The reds were just something that was really cool. It was something different because at the time everyone was doing greens and blues and all this other stuff and yellows, and there was no real red that kind of popped off the page. So it was really, this is the color scheme I wanted. I wanted white, black, and red, and gray, sure.
And so, and how do you utilize other pieces of social media? You've talked about Twitter a lot. Twitter but how are the populations different for, say, like Instagram and Facebook and some other ones?
Well, Facebook is, the algorithm throttles you every single social platform you're on. That will never change. It's gotten worse, to be honest. So Facebook, out of the 600 people that are following on that page, it'll get viewed by maybe 3 to 10 people.
Wow. Yeah.
Twitter is my most consistent platform. I do have Instagram. I do have TikTok, although I haven't posted anything on that yet. Just because it's another piece of content that I'd have to format what I want to showcase on there. I have ideas, and I'll probably be posting on it eventually, but not currently. I have too much stuff to do and edit. 50 interviews in the until September, basically. So, yeah.
So how far out do you schedule?
Well, the main show is Two Geeks Talking is scheduled until basically end of September right now, and I booked either 2 to 3 interviews as a Saturday. So I'm pretty booked that way. Actually, and I don't know if I'm just kicking myself for this, but I created a new show called Two Geeks Talking Rapid Fire, which is literally just 11 questions. You only have 9 to 15 minutes to answer those questions, and then it gets posted the same day.
Wow.
So a lot of people are taking advantage of that. So it should be interesting. I don't know what's going to come of it, but there's a lot of really cool, talented people that have signed up for that as well too, that couldn't get on the main show because it's so booked. So I think it'll be a fun experiment, and it still hits the core questions I normally ask during an interview, but they may change every so often, but still stay in that 11 question format. So yeah.
Right. Wow, that's kind of cool. And is that an addendum to the Two Geeks Talking? So that's still going to be the same.
It's still it's going to be Two Geeks Talking Rapid Fire, because that's the only thing I could think of that, so I could set up my calendar so people could sign up for it.
Okay. All right. And so how often do you, and because people would sign up for it, so as you were saying earlier, so we say we have like artists and writers who will be listening to this and say, hey, I want to talk to Kurt. How do I get on? So they would go to your website, correct? Or what would be the easiest way to sign up?
So the easiest way to sign up would be my Calendly link, which is, I can link it to you, but it's basically calendly.com/Two Geeks Talking. There you go. So there's the link to the two interviews. You can select either or. So if you select the Two Geeks Talking interview itself, it's going to say no dates available, and you're going to have to keep going and going and going
and going.
A little more.
August.
One more.
Oh, what? 27th. See? August.
That's not there. That's not there. There you go. Okay. That's September. Yeah.
All right. There you go.
So yeah, so end of September.
So you record. How important is it to have a consistent schedule as well?
I'm forcing myself to be consistent. If I don't have an interview for a Kickstart Monday, I'll have an interview for a Friday.
Okay.
And that's the only way I can keep the algorithm active for what I do. I should be posting more. I don't have time. I really don't. It takes time to edit. It takes time to, if I don't have my title graphic image created, I have to, get that formatted correctly. I then filter my audio through, Isotope, and once I've gone through Audacity, and once I've edited in Premiere, so I'm using 3 separate pieces of software to literally, clean up the audio so that it's, consistent.
Right. Wow.
I'm lucky my voice is at least consistent, but I still have to increase my levels of my voice, because my system, by default, I don't want to peak. I don't want to go over that sweet spot.
Right.
So I apologize if my audio is low currently here, but if you want clean audio, I can always send you over my recording so you can play with it.
No, you sound great. Yeah. So, and that's an interesting thing how you have that set up. So if somebody has a Kickstarter and they're like, oh, I didn't even know. Oh, I wish I could get on. So basically it's kind of like, well, talk to me next time because I'm booked out. Is there, is there any like leeway or like?
There is and there isn't. It depends on what happens. And I have a list of people that if cancellations occur, they get first come, first serve.
Okay. All right.
But yes, it's quite literally, I'll get people messaging me saying, oh, I just saw an interview for a Kickstarter. I have a Kickstarter ongoing. And I regrettably, and I say this truly, I regrettably have to turn them down sometimes because I don't have the time. And it's a scheduling thing. First off, I can only do so much. Right. And Kickstarters take priority that have been interviewed on the show. Yeah. So I usually sometimes have to rush same day edits on those to get it ready for a Monday. And that takes time. that's at least 6 hours out of my day just to clean things up and make sure that things are consistent. And I want to interview everyone. I truly do. I hate turning down people. That's what kills me the most. I hate turning down creative people because a rejection to some people can be detrimental. And I don't want to be that type of person. I really don't. But I just can't. I'm only one person.
Right. And so how many do you see when it comes to the independent comic creators that are reaching out? Have you seen any new folks as like promoters, indie comic creators working with promoters to help them get through to come onto your show? Or is it usually you talk directly to indie comic creators?
I'm getting a lot more publishers these days, which is fine. I think that's pretty awesome, to be honest. The fact that they're willing to come on the show and talk about the publishing side of things, which I have very little knowledge of, type deal, because I find that fascinating. What is an indie publisher like these days? What do they look like? Are they two guys in a garage type deal, or are they more of here's a corporation and we're really building up a brand and we want to be the next Simon and Schuster or whatever the case might be. And so, for once I have an interview with them, I'll usually get an email saying, hey, we have X, Y, and Z comic creators or graphic novels that we're publishing soon. Can they be on your show? And I think that's great.
So let me ask you, how passionate would you say is, and how defined is that term, indie comic creators? At what point is there like a you're only indie if you have only sold X amount of or you're only making X amount of money? Is at what point is there a point of pride for somebody who, where do you go from indie comics to all of a sudden you are now your comic isn't indie? Your comic isn't indie anymore. Like, how do you have like a mental picture or like a kind of like some sort of like membrane that they could pass through to say, all right, you are now, do you have something in mind? Like, what would that look like?
Anyone that tells you that you have to sell X amount of copies to be a professional comic creator is full of it. and here's why. Anyone that takes the time, and this is anyone, whether you're brand new beginning, whether you're only a writer and you found an artist on Reddit or wherever you found another creative person, or you're an artist and you found a writer to say your story or whatever the case may be, whatever the diagram is for that type of situation. Right. If you have created a comic book, whether it's only digital or whether it's print or whether it's it happens to be picked up by a publisher, you're a professional, in my opinion, because you've created something that no one else is creating. To label yourself as an indie creator sells yourself short as a creative person. If you justifiably consider yourself an indie creator, that's awesome. But you are a creative person that has created a comic, created a graphic novel that has never been created before. You are telling a story that you have either thought up or that you've worked and collaborated on. You're a comic creator, plain and simple. You're a creator, plain and simple.
And what would be your advice to any of those creatives who might be listening to your podcast and maybe get inspired by some of your guests who are still kind of kicking themselves saying, I just got to do this one thing, or I'll do it if I just do this one thing. Like, what would be your advice to any of those creators that are just might not have the self-confidence or just the perseverance that they just need that one extra push? What would be your advice to them?
It's cliche to say just do it, but you have to start somewhere. Right. You have to start with a sketch, start with a writing, start with a single sentence, start with some idea that is digging at your brain that needs to come out. If you would have told me that 14 years ago, as an introverted person at whatever age I was back then, let's say 29ish or 30ish, I don't know, whatever the case may be. I'm old. That I'd be doing a podcast for 14 years, that I have over 1,000 interviews, that I would have over 60 co-hosts, that I would go to comic conventions in Chicago, Toronto. I would do video interviews, and I would interview the likes of like Jill Thompson and Ramon Perez before like an NBC or a CBS during a comic convention. You know, I would have told you you're full of it. I really did not see myself doing this as a long-term goal. Why I keep doing it, it's either, you know, little column A, little column B when it comes to, I like talking to people. I like seeing the creative people that are out there that I don't know anything about, that are first timers on the show. And, you know, I like to procrastinate when it comes to real life stuff. So I think it works out well.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Kurt. We're at the top of our hour. So if people want to follow you and follow your podcast and learn more about your show, what would be the best place they could go?
Well, the best way to go to see all of my stuff is you can find this interview. Sorry, that's my segue. You can find all my 1,000+ interviews, for the most part, until they get uploaded to podcast format, at twogeekstalking.com or tgtmedia.com. But really, our YouTube channel is youtube.com/tgtmedia. And social media wise, I'm either at Kurt Sasso, KURTSASSO, mainly on Twitter. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me that way. My email address is on other websites, YouTube, etc. as well too. And you know, I love talking with creative people. The Calendly link is another great way to schedule yourself on the interview. Maybe, you know, you have a project upcoming that fits that mold of whenever I have space available. Sign up for it. Let's do it. You know, it takes one step. And I think after 14 years, I can safely say that, you know, I love creative people, and I'm willing to talk with you about your creative passion for whatever you do.
Cool. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Kurt, and come back on anytime. This has been great.
Well, thanks, Bennett. I appreciate it. This is, you know, I'm rarely on this side of the microphone. You know, I'm getting a little hang of it these days, I think. So, you know, I'd be happy to pop back on whenever you want.
Yeah, perfect. Change the color. What's your favorite color? Is it red?
The reds work, yeah.
The reds work. All right, let me. Well, that's way too red. All right, hang on. Let me.
Yeah.
No, that's too. That's well.
Super red. Yeah, that's all right. That works.
All right, about here.
990000 if you want.
Oh, yeah. What is it?
990000. There you go.
Look at that, man. See?
That's the color I use for all of my reds, basically.
You should get that as like a tattoo. Just what's 990000? Oh, it's the color of my podcast.
You're asking too many questions now. We're going into color theory of the RGB variety. That isn't going to work out.